主席. Thank you, Mr. President. Excellencies, distinguished colleagues, I thank you for giving CTED the opportunity to brief the Council on the 14th report of the Secretary General on the threat posed by Daesh and the efforts of the United Nations to assist member states to counter the threat. I would also like to thank USG Vorenkov for his overview that you've just heard just now on the report, and also thank UNOCT and the Analytical and Sanctions Monitoring Team for their invaluable collaboration in preparing the report. Mr. President, just last November, the Counter-Terrorism Committee held a special meeting to commemorate the 20th anniversary of the September 11th attacks and the subsequent adoption of the Security Council Resolution 1373 and the establishment of the committee. On that occasion, the committee issued an important outcome document which not only highlighted notable successes achieved in countering terrorism and violent extremism conducive to terrorism, but also stressed the need to strengthen national, regional, and international efforts to address and mitigate the emerging challenges. The global terrorist landscape continues to present a range of complex challenges for member states. The threat of Daesh persists as the group and affiliates continue to recalibrate their strategic and operational approaches. Daesh has become more decentralized, with supporters notably emerging and expanding up their operations in battlefields of West, East, Southern, and Central Africa, and is also seeking to exploit recent development in Afghanistan. It has also continued to regroup in its traditional geographical center, resulting in a resurgence of violence in Iraq and the Syrian Arab Republic. Developments following the recent death of the Daesh leader should be closely monitored. Mr. President, over the past 2 years, the terrorist threat has, of course, also intersected with the many challenges posed by COVID-19 pandemic. Daesh and the other terrorist groups have sought to exploit fault lines arising from social restrictions, political tensions, and economic downturns exacerbated by the pandemic. In some states, increasing political instability has led to critical governance situations, which may exacerbate a significant existing terrorist threat. Many states have understandably delivered resources or diverted resources from counterterrorism training and capacity building to pandemic-related efforts, thereby creating challenges for states requiring counterterrorism assistance. The pandemic has also influenced existing trends in terrorism and violent extremism conducive to terrorism, and has also generated human rights concerns, which may provide fertile ground for further exploitation and potential radicalization to violence. The challenges that have arisen during the pandemic have curtailed not only counterterrorism operations, but also civil society and humanitarian outreach, thereby worsening pre-existing conditions of displacement and insecurity. The lack of measures and strategies to ensure safe and voluntary repatriation, as well as comprehensive and tailored prosecution, rehabilitation, and reintegration may also expose already vulnerable populations to further violence. Monitoring and suppressing the flow of funds to Daesh and other terrorist groups also remains an imperative for the international community. Terrorists and terrorist groups also continue to exploit social media and online platforms. The global rise in hate speech and also misinformation and disinformation, often online, also remains a concern for many member states. Mr. President, against the backdrop of these many challenges, CTED continues to coordinate closely with UNOCT and other key partners to ensure that the Counter-Terrorism Committee's recommendations serve as the basis for relevant capacity building activities. I would also note that CTED recently issued its updated global survey of member states' implementation of Resolution 1373 and other resolutions, as well as the updated global survey of the implementation of Resolution 1624, and also a number of other reports and studies on the challenges faced by member states. Acting under the all-of-a-UN approach and in accordance with Council Resolutions 2395 and 2617, CTED has continued to work closely together with UNOCT on a series of activities aimed at enhancing the capacities of member states on inter alia, countering terrorist travel, the creation of fusion cells, countering the trafficking of small arms and light weapons, the protection of vulnerable targets, countering the financing of terrorism, and prosecution, rehabilitation, and reintegration. Mr. President, combating the global terrorist threat requires a multilateral approach that involves close collaboration among member states, UN entities, international, regional organizations, and civil society. The strategies and measures employed should also be tailor-made, gender-sensitive, and human rights compliant. CTED, in this regard, will continue to actively support the Council and the Committee in those efforts. Once again, thank you, Mr. President.